Hey everyone, Morgan here with Final Draw, and today we're going to be going over the new Callista burn deck that's been seeing a lot of ladder play in the last few days and was also showcased by Swim on his channel as well. Links to his channel in the description below. But this deck is a Noxus Shadow Isles combination that has a lot of aggro potential and some great combo synergy to really make some strong opening plays. I'll be highlighting each card in the deck and going over how you can utilize it with other cards. So let's go ahead and get started with champions. We'll move on to other units and then we'll finish things off with the spells. For champions, this deck runs 3 Elise and 3 Callista. Elise is a good card if you're attacking on turn 2, as you can get out a fearsome unit. She generates an additional unit upon attack and overall just allows you to establish an early presence on the board. She isn't a key highlight in this deck, but she does have her uses if you aren't pulling other units key to the combos in this deck. Callista can be a good attacking force if you're attacking on odd rounds, as she is a 3 mana cost, so you'll be able to attack with her on turn 3. With the right draws, it is possible to get a Callista flipped on turn 3 and really punish your opponent in the early game, but the key highlight here is that she can take advantage of you playing your combos in this deck. Using a Keeper Butcher or Caretaker Keeper combo will all count towards leveling her, and once she's leveled, she will bring an additional unit for attacks, which can also really help break down your opponent if they're really struggling to keep a strong board, and on top of that will protect her from damage due to her bonded ability. So getting into the units that this deck is really built around, starting with 0 mana units, we have 2 Ravenous Butchers. This is a 3/2 that is played by killing one of your allies. Butcher is one of the key cards to combo off with Cursed Keeper to get yet another strong unit on the field for early damage and board control over your opponents. For 1 mana units, we have 3 Hapless Aristocrats and 3 Precious Pets. Hapless Aristocrat is a good card to have in your starting hand if you're on defense, as it gives you a 1 mana play to defend yourself with, but on top of that, makes for a good trade on blocks, as you'll be getting a 1/1 unit back due to its Last Breath effect. Precious Pet is the best to have in your opening hand if you're attacking first. It's a 1 mana unit that is a 2/1 fearsome, so in most cases, you can get a free hit on your opponent's Nexus, potentially 2 if they're not drawing units to counter your fearsome or using removal in the first 2 rounds that you'll attack. This is an incredibly strong opening unit that can give you a very early advantage. For 2 mana units, we have 3 Cursed Keepers, 3 Crimson Disciples, and 3 Imperial Demolitionists. Cursed Keeper is only going to be useful under 2 conditions. The first being you've pulled a Ravenous Butcher or some sort of kill unit such as Blighted Caretaker that you can play and trigger the Last Breath effect for an escaped abomination, or you can trigger this with a kill spell in your hand such as Glimpse Beyond. You'll trigger the Last Breath effect and benefit from a card draw. Now you can also use Imperial Demolitionist as a last resort to trigger not only the Last Breath effect, but her play effect as well, but it's not advised to do this unless you really have no other options, as you can get more out of an Imperial Demolitionist when you pair her with a Crimson Disciple. They're going to synergize the absolute best, because in a best case scenario on a single play from an Imperial Demolitionist, you can get 4 total damage to the opponent's Nexus in a best case scenario. Now, once Demolitionist has been played, she loses a lot of her value, but she can also be used as a blocker or as a sacrifice to get things such as Ravenous Butcher or Blighted Caretaker on the field for some extra units in a no other options scenario. Just be sure that if you're going to be using Imperial Demolitionist in the late game, you're baiting out any sort of removal before you play her, because if your target is removed with any sort of spells or anything, her effect will no longer happen. So that's just something you want to keep in mind if you're going to count on Imperial Demolitionist in the late game. Bait out any sort of removal before you make that final play. And then for the 2 cost units, we're going to round this up with Crimson Disciple. She is a back row unit that will take damage to hit the enemy Nexus, and as I said, pairs incredibly well with Imperial Demolitionist. But she can also trigger her Nexus damage with the Transfusion Burst spell. We'll be getting into that a little later, as it is a part of this deck. But the great thing about all of these 2 cost units, Disciple, Demolitionist, and Curse Keeper, is that they all center synergize in some fashion to get you either a unit on the board or some form of Nexus damage, even in a less than optimal scenario. But a best case scenario can get you good burst damage in the early game, and that can really put you ahead of your opponent. For 3 costs, we have 3 Blighted Caretakers, which can also be used as a combo on Cursed Keeper to trigger its Last Breath effect, while also getting you 2 2/1 Challenger Ephemeral Saplings on the board on top of the Blighted Caretaker, so you get 3 units for the cost of 1, 4 if you're playing this on top of a Cursed Keeper, but you can use these 2/1 Challenger Ephemeral units to get elusives and backline units out of the way, or you can use it to pull away the big attackers and let your other stuff get in for damage. After you play the Caretaker, it can be used as a blocker or sacrifice fuel for another Blighted Caretaker or even a Ravenous Butcher in no-play scenarios. Moving on to spells, starting with 2 mana spells, we have 2 Vile Feast, 3 Glimpse Beyonds, and 3 Transfusions. Vile Feast and Glimpse Beyond can both be played in multiple ways, all depending on the situation. Vile Feast will allow you to remove 1 health units from your opponent's side, bait out removal on weak units, trigger Cursed Keeper if you have nothing else to do so, and of course you will not only get a 1/1 on the board and 1 health back to your Nexus. So a pretty useful card with a lot of different uses. Glimpse Beyond can be used in the same manner for baiting out removal on your opponents and benefiting when you know your unit is at a loss. You can use this to trigger Cursed Keeper, and of course you draw 2, which can help if you're really in need of cards. And then last for the 2 cost spells, we have Transfusion. This will mainly be used to trigger Crimson Disciple's Nexus damage, but can be used to buff up units if your opponent fails to answer a block, and you can hit them for extra or save a critical unit by giving it some extra health. Transfusion can be applied in several instances, some being more useful than the other, but it is a very strong and cheap spell that can make some really great combos with a lot of key players in this deck, and on top of that, it's a burst spell, so your opponents are unable to interact with it in any way. The final 2 spells are 3 Noxian Fervor and 3 Decimate. Noxian Fervor being a 3 mana spell and Decimate being 5. These are your burn tools, mainly using these to force lethal damage on your opponent's Nexus. Noxian Fervor can be used for direct Nexus damage if your opponent's low, but can also be used to get extra damage on the troublesome cards your opponent is using if you are in a pinch. Noxian Fervor is really great to combo off of the saplings generated by Blighted Caretaker, or even Cursed Keeper in instances where you have no other play. It's a very flexible and very useful spell. Caretaker will allow you to sacrifice an ephemeral unit for 3 damage to anything and not lose key units on your board, but you can also trigger Cursed Keeper for an escaped abomination while still hitting your opponent for 3. So keep this in mind. If you don't have any other plays, these are still options for you to do. Decimate plays best when your opponent is at low health, so play these sparingly and capitalize on them in the late game. Playing against Ionia decks, you should be on the lookout for Deny, but in most instances, you'll hit the Nexus direct without a hitch. As far as mulligans go, you'll be wanting to aim for the combos this deck offers, or a strong opening unit depending on your starting turn. Attacking first round Precious Pet is going to be a good opening unit for you to keep or strive for in your opening hands. If you aren't getting the combo cards in your starting hand, you're going to want to toss everything back. So if you're pulling a Keeper without a Butcher or some form of a kill spell, or Disciple without Transfusion or Demolitionist, you'll be tossing these back. This deck is a lot of fun to play with, tons of great combos, an aggressive playstyle for those that are into that, and overall just a very viable deck when it comes to ladder play in the current meta. Not to mention, aggressive decks are great for quick ladder times due to their ability to get more matches during a given time frame. So let us know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. I've been playing with this deck a lot, been having a ton of fun with it, and I want to see your guys' thoughts as well. What are some decks that you guys want to see us try and mess around with? Let us know in the comments section below. We would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. But with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.